Pat Martin, it is good to see you again.
That's good to see you too, man. I appreciate you having me on very much.
Um, so I last spoke to you last summer about Martin's Barbecue and Hugh Babies, your two concepts. How are they going? What's new?
They are trying to figure out where to start. Overall, all things considering, we're finally starting to pull out of the hole, so to speak. I'll start with Hugh Babies. Hugh Babies, because of its model, I don't know if you remember correctly, but I basically wanted to bring what I remember. I'm 49. What I remember fast food when I was little, fast food wasn't a moniker for crappy food. You know, it was just what it truly is a definition of the level of service. So Hugh Babies, because of its drive-through and because of its limited menu and its price point, when COVID hit last year, it was the first to start to really crawl out. We still took quite a hit. Had to shut one of them down because of COVID, so I went from 5 to 4. But we are in a position now where we're up actually over 2019. A lot of that is because of operations and because of the insane focus that COVID forced all of us to really check ourselves, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I got a longtime buddy who I went to college with, who's the brand manager for me at Hugh Babies. His name's Chris Kaiser, and he's done a really great job. Really focused on the food, the facility, and hospitality and our guests. So Hugh Babies is doing well. Martin's, we got, remind you, I've got 10 of those. They are probably around 70% of pre-COVID still, maybe climbing up. A couple of them are up more around 75%, but they are pulling out. Those are the stores that are in what we call around rooftops, or homes or whatever, So my downtown Nashville store is still taking it on the chin hard. So I would say in 2020, the word for profitability was really breaking even.
Right.
If it was break even, it was like doing it was like pulling a 20% EBITDA from 2019, a year before. So we were breaking even, maybe probably 2 or 3% EBITDA, maybe, which was definitely calling for pulling the champagne out and high fives around the table. But my downtown store is a unicorn for what I do. It was a big store. It's not cliche like a lot of the other stuff down in Nashville, but it is a much larger version of what I do at my other stores. So the sales volumes there were probably equal to 5 stores in and around out in what I would call the suburbs around rooftops.
Mm-hmm.
So every penny we actually made out there as we started making up ground, that downtown store pulled it away. Ended up having to open it back up prematurely, which we didn't do because we didn't want to do. I didn't want to do because the bank really, I wouldn't say forced us, but it was getting one of those deals where the bank was like, hey, man, they were very nice. They really worked with us. It was like, hey, try to get open some way. When you're sitting there and you're like, man, I don't know how to tell you, but downtown Nashville is a ghost town. It's, but there's not much you can say. They hold your debt. They hold your note. So
Right.
we opened back up. So now we're at 50% capacity down there. My beer garden is the only thing that's open right now. And it's doing, relatively speaking, really well. We're at about 35% pre-COVID right now. Whereas I would say in March 1st, it was 10%. So there's light at the end of the tunnel there too. It's just that thing is so, especially in any downtown corridor of a major city or a mid-major city like Nashville or Charlotte or those types of cities are, the convention business and the density of activities downtown is just, it's vital. It's absolutely vital. And in Nashville's case, Music City, with it having the concerts that it had, but also the convention space that it was building on. And then, of course, the Titans and the Predators, all that. Those are starting to come back, but the conventions I'm still waiting on to come back. So it's a long-winded answer around answering your question. I hope I got all the points, but yeah, I'm more positive than I was when I last spoke to you. I can tell you that.
I like a long-winded answer. It has details, and so the problem in downtown Nashville isn't that people aren't going back to work in offices. I'm in New York, and people aren't going to work in offices. It's more that you don't have the visitors that Nashville's accustomed to. Is that right?
Yeah, every city's unique, and
Hmm.
Nashville, like a lot of mid-major cities, is there was a serious core density of folks that work downtown. But if you just took in the whole Metro DMA, um, it's like putting a couple deck chairs on the Queen Mary compared to where everybody works out in like the suburbs and those office buildings.
Right, I see.
So Nashville is very dependent on, I would say, the Monday through Thursday traffic um, is very dependent on conventions, especially the lunchtime bill. I think I'm on a board down here, and Nashville was for every dollar spent downtown in 2019, right around 60% of it was convention business, and another 28 or 30 was just Bobby and Sue who wanted to drive down from Cincinnati to Nashville for the week, and then the rest of it, the remaining basically 10% was locals. Um, whether they live down there or whether we were going down there for a sporting event or game or whatever. But the convention business it's really hit us hard. Especially, I can't stress enough that lunchtime, that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 11 to 3 o'clock, really was a big difference maker.
So, but Nashville, as you said, the downtown Nashville, that's the unicorn and the anomaly. The other restaurants are doing okay. At Hugh Babies, you guys are actually ahead of 2019 because you got better. It sounds like that you
Uh,
made operational
we
fixes.
did. We did, Brett. It was a real. I'll have to tell you, I don't know. We got better at doing what we knew we should have been doing in the first place, and I think a lot of operators did that. What
Right,
happens is that a lot of times it happens during cycles of economic boom or recovery where volume. There's an old adage in the restaurant business that volume can hide all your mistakes. So
right.
you can have a really high volume restaurant, and volume is relative. Volume can be high for a lemonade stand that does 5,000 a week, and it can be high for a restaurant that does 300,000 a week. So it is relative. But the point is that you can, if you're in a high volume restaurant as an operator or a general manager, it's human nature. You just get lax, and you start missing some I's to dot and missing some T's to cross, and then when you have a come to Jesus like COVID was, it it forces, well, first of all, it started with me and my voice, like, okay, blowing the whistle, everybody out of the pool, we're getting back to the basics. Yes, there were some things we had to adjust to, especially with off premise and dining rooms closing down, but all that's gone away. But even those things really weren't anything that was like some Phil Necro curveball being thrown at us. I mean, we knew what to do, and we just had to get back to our basics and start literally, I mean, proverbially putting our head down with our blinders on and doing a better job today at all the disciplines than we did yesterday. But this time, you couldn't mess up because the volume wasn't there to save your butt. So it was, I think that a lot of people, especially full service restaurants and no question chef driven restaurants, had huge adaptations. They had massive changes that they aren't accustomed to, they had to change to. Folks in my fields, which is fast casual and quick service, which is, the new nice word for fast food,
Right.
already knew these mechanics. They just got sloppy from them. And the ones that went back to the basics and kicked the sloppiness out the door, they're probably the ones that are still around.
So it was a question of you already had systems in place. You just had to enforce them and make sure that everybody was doing what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, yeah, it was much more enforcement. Yeah, a lot more of that, no question. That's right.
Uh, and are you still facing supply issues? That's something that everybody had to deal with last year.
Uh, we are, yeah, and it's actually what we are dealing with last year is a different kind of supply issue we're dealing with this year. Let's just call it supply chain.
Hmm.
The issue we're dealing with now is the slaughter of all the pigs and cows that they killed last year. So the herds are much smaller. And brother, I am I mean, it's like playing a puzzle every week right now with my specs, my spec items. Like hogs, no problem. I'm getting my whole hogs great, but my whole shoulders, I spec a 20-pound whole shoulder with skin all the way on. Um, those are running out. I'm trying to figure out where to find them. So I'm having to use some shoulders and some Boston butts, which Boston butts are great. They really are. That's what most barbecue restaurants use, and that's why they're so the supply of them is so predominant out there. But I like cooking a whole shoulder because it's the old way of doing it, and I like cooking them longer. But it's forcing me now to start adding some Boston butts now with my whole shoulders because that's what the big packer houses and well anybody any USDA plant that's what they're cutting for you.
So is
So
that, I mean, the Boston butt is a shoulder cut too, right? So is
Boston
it
butt
just,
is yeah, it's the deltoid, and then the picnic on the shoulder is the shank. They call it the shank or the picnic, but it's the Boston butt and the picnic put together as a whole shoulder.
I see. Okay.
It sounds so weird, like, well, why don't you just tell them not to cut that? And it just doesn't work that way, you know. But and the biggest thing is chicken wings. Chicken wings have absolutely skyrocketed, and they're skyrocketing so fast that I don't know how in the world, especially when the big guys like the Hooters and the Buffalo Wild Wings run through their contracts this year. I don't know how in the world, other than we're all having to pass these price increases onto our guests, which is always the last thing you do. You always try to fix your own inefficiencies first before you ever pass it on to a guest. But we're at a point now where there's nothing we can do. I mean, a plate of brisket, I just had to raise it to $19.99, which is, man, it was hard for me to tell my graphic guy, Blake, like, yes, I approve that, put that in there. You know, it was hard to see it because it's sticker shock, but there's nothing I can do, and there's nothing anybody right now is going to be able to do except the supply and demand so messed up. You just have to pass it on to the guests and hope they don't blame you for it. You
And you
know,
raised it to 19.99 from what? What was it previously?
I raised it 50 cents, which is a big hike, you know, in what we're doing. But to put it in perspective, last year our brisket was 16.99. So it's and beef is not the problem anymore. Right now the problem is pork and chicken, but specifically chicken wings, and that's going to end. Those dominoes are going to end up affecting the chicken, the wog market, we call it, because what happens is that, you know what, if I can't get shoulders anymore and Boston butts are going higher, and this is really a grocery store aspect that mom or pop does when they go shop. This is too high. Well, I'm going to go buy wings and just cook wings. Well, they're expensive too, so now I'm going to buy boneless thighs. Well, that domino, it follows it, you know, and so as people stop buying these, supply and demand. So we're waiting to exhaust all that while they get their herds built back up. And man, it is really, really tough.
So
But
you raised brisket from 16.99 to 19.49, and then again to 19.99.
there were four price increases. We eventually got to from 16.99 to 19.49, and literally last week I just raised it to 19.99.
And that's not because the beef is more expensive, but you need to raise the price of the beef to offset the cost of the wings, right?
That is correct. It is.
Okay.
There's always a menu metric game, and so you have to take into account what your guest perceives as always supposed to be cheap, but also what your guest perceives is like, well, I'll pay a premium for that. So guests usually will pay a premium for turkey. They'll pay a premium for brisket or beef so long as you do it well. You know, you can't. I couldn't charge $19.99 and go serve select grade brisket. So we're serving upper 2/3 choice, which is the one grade right below prime. And we may get to a point here where prime, as crazy as it may sound, prime may be for a little while cheaper than upper 2/3 choice.
Hmm.
But so what we do is we shift those to pork. Well, the next price increase, if we have to take one, will have to be in pork and will have to be in chicken.
So do you think that, I mean, these prices are going to be higher? You're going to keep them that high, probably. I mean, you probably don't see a time when you'll be able to bring them back down.
I have brought my prices back down in the past, and I don't know that I've ever gotten any credibility from the guests for doing that, but I do feel like, well, I passed it on to you before, I can take it now, and so I'm going to pass this back to you. Not all the time, but I think that And probably by first or second quarter of 2022, we're going to see the supply chain level back out. Between now and then, it's going to be really stormy waters, no question. And I probably will give some of my pricing back to my guests, like for brisket, for example. Or if I have to take one on pork, I may give that one back to my guests once we are able to do so.
Be sure to check out more independent restaurant news content at restaurant-hospitality.com.